Hi, I'm Em, and this is Fangfaria. In this episode, I'll be talking about reluctance to take time off work. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but I'm still really going to struggle with the concept of taking a day off work. Now, I have personal experience of this. I have seen colleagues returning to work too early, coming to work with casts on, all sorts of things with crutches. I've been in the same scenario myself. I've broken my hand and come in to take an impression on a patient when I should have been off. I've come in with, rolled ankles. Not that you see it so much in this kind of COVID era, but I'll drag myself in with a head cold because I can fight through it. I'll drag myself in with neck pain or a migraine, or when I've not slept the night before because of a UTI. All these things that any sane, normal person that's trying to look after their health would just take a day off sick. So why don't we? Why time after time are we reluctant to take the day off? Is it that we think we're so important that the world can't do without us? I don't think so. I think part of it is that it's too much admin to take a day off. The cancelling of patients, the rebooking of patients, the dealing with the patients that get upset that you're human and you've had to take a day off, the increase in likelihood of complaints from delayed appointments or people turning up because they didn't get the messages, the increased pressure in some workplaces I've had on your nurse to take the day off because you're not in and you're not seeing patients. Pressures from all angles. The fact that most of us are contracted or self-employed or business owners, so we're not necessarily getting paid for a day off, particularly a single day off like you might for a head cold or a migraine or something like that. That really insurance and income protection is only kicking in after a full week off, which has got to be something that bit more severe. But the reason I'm recording this is that last week, so I think it's 4 or 5 days ago, bear with me, I am concussed, I was knocked off my bike by a car and came out relatively unscathed. I'm bruised and battered and all sorts of colours of purple and yellow and green from the waist down. I did slide on the road. I smacked my head hard enough to split the helmet and my bike is knackered. But I'm doing all right. And, you get to the bit, I've been in A&E for hours, they've x-rayed me, I've got no broken bones, I'm all good. And you're chatting with the doctor and he's like, well, do you need a certificate for work? I'm like, oh, I'll be all right. Maybe stick me down for a day or two. A day or two. I've just been knocked off my bike by a car at speed onto concrete, and yes, probably defied a much nastier end to the day. But I'm still thinking I'm going to be in work on Monday because that's kind of how my brain works. And it even took until Sunday and the nausea kicking in to realise that I wasn't going to be in on Monday. And maybe I should go check back in with the doctor on Monday and reassess for Tuesday. So I didn't cancel my Tuesday. I got them to shorten it because I was thinking best case scenario, I'll be all right to just do a shorter day. I can limp around with my crutches as long as the concussion is kind of improving. I'll be just fine. And my doctor looked at me like I was insane and said, no, you're having a week off and then we'll assess whether or not you return part-time. But why does it take that somebody to be able to say that to us? Why do we not come to that conclusion ourselves? Because quite often when it comes to taking time off, the decision is left to us. And if we've got strong supportive partners, they may be able to step in and go, no, you're not going to work. And I've had that before and they've been right. But other than that, it's down to us. So whilst I was kind of reminded of this time, and I am off, which is good, the time it makes me really think of was I had more of a chronic injury. So occupational injury. I was taking out a lower 6 or a lower 7 that was like a nail in concrete. And I ended up with a sudden movement down, and I wrenched kind of my neck and my shoulder. Didn't think too much of it, carried on with my day. The following day it was sore and I struggled to move my neck and shoulder, but it wasn't a bad enough injury that I immediately could kind of write myself off. It just felt like a sprain or a strain I would brush off, but it didn't go away. And I would be all right for an hour or two, and then I couldn't move my arm and I couldn't move my neck. And what this was leading to was cancelling days that I'd got halfway through, trying to use my days off, because I think at the time I was working a Monday and then a Thursday, Friday. So I think I took a couple of Mondays off because that gave me nearly a full week of not dentisting to recover. But it just couldn't do it. I was just chronically having problems. And in this time, we were getting patients that were being cancelled for a second time. And part of me wanted to soldier on through, but at the same time, my doctor wouldn't really sign me off, or my physio wouldn't really say, no, you can't work. And I had to make the call in the end to say, no, I'm going to take this time off. I'd got some leave coming up anyway and managed to roll it into a big kind of 3-week break. And even after that, it required an awful lot of rehab. I had MRIs, I had x-rays. I saw the All Blacks doctor about my neck injury, and her advice was to find something else to do, pretty much, neck incompatible with dentistry. And I went through all of this, and this was kind of this intermittent time on, time off, increased stress. I'm quite sure it contributed to my burnout. I'm happy to say that the end result of that is that I have managed to just rehab myself with strength and conditioning training over a slow, long period. And that must have happened, back in 2016, and it's not a consideration or a problem of mine at the moment. That said, I've probably got a bit of whiplash, so I'll have to watch that it doesn't kind of re-aggravate the same thing. But it's this, we would love to just say that we could be sensible enough people to say, I'm not having a good day, I need to stop, I need to rest, the world won't stop turning without me, I'm taking time off. And the doctor said something to me this week as well. She said, are you self-employed? Said, because self-employed people or contractors will always return to work early. And some of that is the lack of monetization for our time off. So I've had to do this a few times with my insurance. So I've been signed off for a week so I can claim on my income protection. But it's not as straightforward as having a salary so that you just say, I'm going to get X amount for my week off. I now have to submit financial records for the last year, and you get an average of that over the year. But of course, there's been COVID and there's been lockdown. I've also started a new job 6 months ago, so the last 12 months don't reflect what I've done. And previous times I've claimed for this, and you can be having a great year, but you're actually only insured for the rubbish year you had the year before. So it's a layer of complexity. You're not going to get as much as you do from just fronting up and going to work. But the reality is that you won't be as productive at work. You're more likely to open yourself up to complaints and make mistakes. You're more likely to have to take longer time to do things or redo things. So actually the time isn't as productive, and yes, we should just take time off. But part of it is that we don't want to let people down. We don't want to let our patients down. We don't want to let our staff down. We don't want to make war work for others. We don't want the receptionist to have to get on the phone and deal with all those patients on top of the calls she's already getting, particularly at a time when actually at this time we've had one staff member off at one practice that I work so we've been super busy there, and then I'm off, and then the other practice, the other dentist is off on leave, and now I'm going to be off. Shout out to Julia. She probably has first heard of this here. I'm fine. I'll be back at work next week. But we don't want to let people down. We don't want to make more work for others. And we're hyper aware of time sensitive appointments. So I'll go back to the time. So I broke my hand, and that was actually, compared to the neck injury, a relief, because I went to A&E, my hand was broken. That was that. I couldn't work, signed off. None of this, can you work? Maybe you could do shorter days. Maybe you could do lighter duties. I got completely signed off. That said, I had one of those patients that everything kind of went a bit wrong for, or if it could go wrong / be more complicated than it needed to be, it happened every time. And just before I had gone away, I'd taken an impression for a denture and it needed to be redone. And this was after, failed composites, and then a post crown that failed, and then this was going to be the immediate denture. And this thing had stretched out for months. So I dragged myself in. I'm pulling a glove over my cast and take this one impression. I had to get my parents to drive me to work to do it. And I get it done and dusted, because then it's just something else off the list. And again, you think, well, why just not get one of your colleagues to do it? And one part of that is that it's going to be your work at the end of the day, and you don't want to you want to be responsible for all the stages, because if there is a problem then with the fit of, it was a chrome, so of the metalwork, you want it to have been your impression that was at fault and not put that on somebody else. But I think there's also a fear that we all have those patients that we've had to do, maybe not compromised treatment on, because they've been more difficult to work on for whatever reason. Whether they're a mover, or whether it's like working at the bottom of the sea, whether it's that they've got a tongue that wants to join in, maybe it's that you had equipment issues that day, all those things that probably aren't the ideal representation of the standard of work you like to perform on a day-to-day basis. And I think what we all fear and dread is that patient will end up in front of another dentist that has less than kind and considerate thoughts on that, and judge it as they see it, not necessarily without the backstory. So you want to keep treating your patients, your complex patients, the patients with things that are ongoing. You don't want them to end up in somebody else's book, because sometimes that can be more stressful than it needs to be too. But the other thing is there's the consequences of cancelled appointments and seeing another dentist with a slightly different opinion in the meantime. Is it all just lends patients who are maybe slightly on the edge anyway, on the verge of being more likely to complain? Whilst it sounds ridiculous that people would be upset with us that we're sick and we have to take time off, they are, because it's their life and their time. And as we talked about in the time pressure episode, it's time they've taken off work, it's money they spent or they're not earning at work. And there's all sorts of reasons why, particularly if it's repeated rebooks and things like that they get upset. And I had one of my, I say biggest complaints. It didn't go anywhere for various reasons, and I won't go into it in huge detail, but during this time I referred to with my neck, when I was kind of in and out, and I would come in and I just couldn't function anymore and had to leave in the morning. We had a patient who didn't have a cell phone, didn't always pick up their messages off their home phone, and despite cancellations with advance notice, we quite often wouldn't get hold of this person, and they would come in, and whilst they were seen by another dentist when they were in, they took it as an affront that I was personally avoiding them, because there were complications with the treatment we were doing, and it escalated to a sit down with the patient, with my practice manager and her representative, and it just got really ugly and incredibly stressful. as it turned out, thankfully, there were investigations and nothing was at fault on my end, but it doesn't make it any less stressful. But the complaint came not just out of communication errors, but communication on top of their stresses and what was going on in their lives at the time, and then the feeling that they weren't being looked after or taken seriously just for the physical fact that I couldn't see them for appointments because I wasn't capable of work. But yeah, it just kind of went round and round. And that was one of those that it was the one time that was like, enough. I just need to take time off and heal. And I'm glad I did it. And since then, and probably since returning from burnout, actually, I would like to think I'm a bit better at taking time off. The story I just told you about A&E and being hit by a car doesn't necessarily reflect that. But I don't want staff coming in with colds and stomach bugs and just being revolting. I don't want that, and I don't need it. And I try to be more respectful of not taking that into the practice as well. Part of the things we face on this is for me certainly my upbringing, and that's having two working parents that, you were going to school regardless. You were going to the doctors and you were going to get antibiotics, and you would go to school and you would just be fine till the end of the school day. And I see that now that I'm a parent myself. I've had days where I've gone in and I've said, look, I've dosed the kids up and I've dropped them at preschool, but there's a good possibility we've only got an hour or two to work with before I get called back. So I'm not really kind of improving the cycle. I'm continuing it a little bit. But it's that reluctance to take it off. You're almost kind of rewarded and praised for making it in and for sticking through it and putting up, particularly injuries. Not so much, arriving snotty and horrendous at work, and especially with this kind of COVID stuff, you wouldn't be let through the door. But it's that kind of, good on you. I came in regardless, and I came in no matter what. But yeah, we're not doing anyone any favours. But we get rewarded for not taking sick days because you get to claim them at some point. And then, it's almost that anger and over taking too many sick days, judgment and shame over taking too many sick days. If you're a parent, you'll be aware that obviously you have to take sick days for your kids when they're sick. And you can't help that. You just have to do it. I have had times in the past where I've received terrible kind of pushback and questioning, and why can't you come in when my kids have been sick? And it's like, they're my kids. I can't ask someone else to look after a sick child for me. I have to look after. But it's that presumption that you will find a way in any way to come in. I don't know enough to be able to reflect whether it's a Western or an Eastern philosophy kind of thing, but we reward for showing up, we reward for the lack of inconvenience, and it is inconvenient. I mean, as a contractor, and another conversation for another time as to why dentists or associate dentists are self-employed or contracted when really they are in everything but name an employee. We don't get sick pay, so then there's the reluctance to take time off for that. My husband has to take sick days for the kids when we can, because he gets paid for them, and thankfully he's not someone that particularly gets sick himself. So it's something that we just need to rethink and reframe and look at differently, and ask ourselves, big picture, is it going to be such a big deal if we take the time off? And the answer's no, because unfortunately, whilst we have all those kind of protective and concern and duty of care things for our patients, the world will continue if we don't go into work tomorrow. It will get picked up within the practice, or they'll find treatment within other practices. And no, it's not ideal, and no, it's not convenient, but we are all just human, as are they, and things will go on. What we need to do is apply our own oxygen mask first. We need to look after ourselves, not only to be better at work and for our patients, and when we're there, be, kind of the real deal, not a compromised version of it. But we need to be better for home, and we need to recover for those for whom we are unreplaceable. So if this accident on Saturday had gone a different way, yes, my colleagues would be sad. Yes, my patients would be sad. But there would be another dentist in the practice before long, and things would be ticking along as normal. My children and my husband and my parents won't have the same ease of transition. I won't be replaced. I will be missed. And it's the same whether it's something as extreme as the accident I've had, or whether it's actually just looking after yourself so that you're not just limping along enough to get through a day's work and then collapse when you get home, but that you can get through your work and be everything you need to be that parent, that sibling, that best friend, that partner, that son or daughter to everybody around you, because actually that's where you're unreplaceable. And you are only human. Take time off when you need it. So look after yourselves. I am, and I try not to bounce off anything else in the short term. As always, if you want to continue the conversation, I'm on Twitter at @fang_farrier. I'd love to hear just the tales of what you've dragged yourself into work with, or what you've seen colleagues drag themselves into work with, because we do it all the time. And whilst I've talked about this as an associate, it's the same for business owners, and sometimes more so because that compensation and insurance model doesn't necessarily carry you through or continue a business for you. So I'd love to hear it all. Please comment, and catch you next time.